When do people question what they believe? Not the small things, not preferences or opinions, but the foundational beliefs, the ones lives are built on. Arthur Morgan spent 30 years living one way, and in his final moments, he questioned everything. The tragedy isn't that he died, but it's the fact that he waited until he was dying to ask. Arthur lost his parents young, and when someone loses their parents young, someone else has to fill that space. For Arthur, it was Dutch Van Der Linde, not a father exactly, but close enough. There's something about identity when it's still forming, when the shape isn't set yet. Someone else's voice becomes the voice. Their certainty becomes your certainty. Dutch had a worldview, a philosophy, a way of seeing the world that made sense in the chaos. And Arthur, still malleable, still forming, absorbed it. Not through force, not through argument, just by proximity, through repetition, through the quiet authority of someone being looked up to. Dutch believed the world was broken, that civilization was a lie, that living outside the law wasn't just survival, it was righteousness. And Arthur believed him. For 20 years, he believed him. There's a specific feeling to being certain. It's not hopeful, it's not optimistic, it's certain. Arthur robbed a train in broad daylight and felt justified. He shot men who resisted and called it survival. He collects debts with violence and believes it's honest work. Not because he's evil, not because he enjoys it, but because within Dutch's worldview, it makes sense. To them, they're not criminals, they're free men. They're not hurting people, they're resisting a corrupt system that would crush them otherwise. Dutch would stand around the campfire and talk about civilization as the real violence, about how the law protected the rich and punished the free. And Arthur believed him. When someone believes what they're doing is justified, they can do almost anything. For 20 years, Arthur did. The framework held, the certainty remained, until it didn't. And then Dutch's worldview started to crack. Not all at once, not within a single moment, but slowly. Dutch left John to die on a train robbery, said it was necessary. Dutch shot a woman in Blackwater, said it was unavoidable. Dutch kept talking about one more school while the gang fell apart around him, kept demanding loyalty while sacrificing anyone who questioned him. The philosophy about freedom and resistance started to sound less like principle and more like justification, less like truth and more like what Dutch needed to believe for himself to keep going. This is what Arthur notices. There's a particular feeling when something believed starts to unravel, not because it's argued against, not because new information changes it, but because the foundation itself was always fake, and now the cracks are visible. Arthur spent 20 years building his identity on Dutch's worldview. Every robbery was for the gang, every death was for survival. Every choice was justified by the framework, and now it's collapsing, which meant everything Arthur had done, every crime, every death, every choice, was built on nothing. Dutch wasn't a philosopher, he was just a man, a desperate, charismatic, and failing man, and Arthur had followed him for 20 years. When a belief system collapses, a question surfaces. Am I a bad person? Not did I do bad things, that's easy to answer. Arthur knew he did, but am I bad? At the core, in the parts that don't change, there's something about that question that sits different when there's no framework to hide behind anymore. When the beliefs that justified everything are gone, when what's left is just what was done. And what Arthur did was violent for 20 years. Arthur didn't believe in heaven or hell, he didn't believe in divine judgment, but he didn't like the idea of dying as a bad person either. And then he gets tuberculosis. From beating a man for a loan, a plain immoral act, a choice rooted in the very worldview that was now exposed as hollow. The diagnosis didn't just mean death, it meant time, finite time, time that could now be counted, and that calcified his fear. So what does Arthur do? He adopts a new belief, a temporary and desperate belief. Morality is a scorecard. He starts helping people. He returns money to a widow, he helps a veteran, he saves a snake-bitten man on the side of the road. These are small acts, they're good acts too. In his mind, if enough good things could be done, maybe the bad could be balanced out. If enough people were helped, enough lives saved, enough right choices made, Maybe the math would work out. Maybe death could come neutral or close to good. This is shame-based morality. If I do X good, I am no longer bad. If I help enough strangers, it erases what I did to that family in the robbery. If I save this person, it balances out the person I killed. Arthur's mistake is seeing morality like it's accounting, like the universe keeps a ledger and the scale can be tipped if enough weight is added to the other side. Arthur tried, he helped, he gave, he saved, but he didn't have time. 20 years of bad, a few months of good. The maths doesn't work out. He couldn't balance it out. And this is when he meets Sister Calderon. Sister Calderon doesn't try to convince Arthur he's good. She doesn't tell him the scorecard was balanced. She doesn't absolve him. She just said something simple. Who he was doesn't matter. Who he is now does. Not as erasure, not as forgetting, but as recognition that identity isn't fixed by the past. Arthur had spent 20 years being one person, built on Dutch's beliefs, certain in his righteousness, and now in his final moments he was someone else, questioning, uncertain, trying to figure out what mattered when the frameworks were gone. Sister Calderon believed heaven was possible for him, not because he balanced the scorecard, not because the past didn't count, but because his actions now, in these final moments, were rooted in something higher than survival. He was choosing to help, not for himself, not for Dutch, not for the gang, but because it was right, and that mattered. With the final months of his life left, Arthur chose to help John Marston and his family escape. Not because it would save him, not because it would redeem him, but because they deserved a chance at something better. A chance Arthur never had. A chance to build a life outside the worldview that had trapped them both. This wasn't a scorecard morality system anymore. Arthur knew he was dying. He knew helping John wouldn't balance anything out. It wouldn't erase the past. It wouldn't make him good. But he did it anyways. Not to fix his shame, not to earn heaven, but because it was right. Because John's son deserved a father. Because Abigail deserved safety. Because Jack deserved a life that wasn't running. This is Arthur's final sense of morality. It's not self-serving. It's not shame-based either. But good that outlasts him. He used what little time he had left to give someone else more time. Dying isn't required to make that kind of choice, but for Arthur, it took dying to see it clearly. The tragedy of Arthur Morgan isn't that he died, it's that he waited until he was dying to question. For 20 years, he never examined the belief Dutch imposed on him, never asked if the worldview made sense, never wondered if there was another way to live. He was certain, and certainty is comfortable, even when it's wrong. If everything Dutch told me was stripped away, what would be left? Arthur found an answer. In his final moments, he found something real. But he didn't have time to live it. He just had time to act on it, once, for John, for a purpose higher than himself. And then he died. Most people aren't dying, at least not the way Arthur was, not with months left, not with the clock visible, but most people are living with belief systems they've never questioned. Maybe they came from parents, maybe from a teacher, maybe from someone who they looked up to while their identity was still forming. And maybe they're solid, maybe they're true. Or maybe they're like Dutch's worldview, convincing, comfortable, and hollow. The only way to know is to question them. Why is this believed? Is it personal or was it given? Is the certainty there because it's true or because certainty is easier than doubt? Arthur didn't need to be dying to examine what he believed. He just needed to be willing. But he wasn't, not for 20 years. And when he finally was, he had months. Most people have more than months. Arthur is a mirror, not because he became good, not because he redeemed himself, but because he questioned. Finally, tragically late. Most people are alive, but what are they waiting for?